Hello, I'm Chris Williams from Read Comics, They're Bad For You. I'm just putting my channel's name on this so I can promote my own channel. Now, we're going to be today reviewing Tony Stark Iron Man issue 11. We'll start with the cover. The cover by Alexander Lozano is a good cover, and I really enjoy it. It shows a basic techno-organic Iron Man molding his body into weapons about to be fired upon his enemies, while the armor itself is roaring like a wild animal. It almost looks like a lion, I would say, with all the metal around the head looking almost like a lion mane. I gotta tell you, I really enjoy this cover. The cover itself says God Killer. I will also say this. Apparently they decided to put Tony Stark in front of Iron Man because they probably wanted to draw a line between him and Rory Williams. Yeah, that horrible series that came out that was promoted by Brian Michael Bendis. You know, the character both Marvel and Bendis tried to stuff down our throats and say to us if we didn't like her, we were racist. Yeah, that guy. And here we have writing this issue, as you can see, that once again Marvel has given us another first page just listing who has worked on this comic book. Another of Bendis' compatriots, Dan Slott. And I have a bad feeling about this comic already. Now, the highlight of this issue was the cover. The artwork was done by Valerio Schiti, and his artwork might be good or not. It looks sort of plain right here on this panel where we have Jocasta being asked by one of Tony Stark's workers, or whether a woman named Bethany, I don't really know who she is, that she asks what's going on, and Jocasta says, "See for yourself, Bethany." And we see the Avengers fighting the Controller, who's been using something to cause himself to gain even more power, and he's basically grown to be even a more gigantic, uglier version of the Hulk. Okay, he's not as ugly as the current She-Hulk, who eventually I've heard is going to be turned back into her more beautiful self soon. So yeah, he's basically just a giant, ugly Hulk now. Now, he says, "I'll crush all of you," while a guy with a green arm is about to punch him in the face, while the Wasp flies around him. Here we have apparently another character who's apparently related to Tony Stark, his brother, and who's with his compatriot, this woman here. He located Iron Man, who they've been tracking, and yes, he's in the same area as the Avengers and the Controller, but apparently not at the same altitude, because apparently he's floating out in the atmosphere of space. Well, he does something to cause Iron Man to wake up, and we'll see that. And it causes him to fall back to the ground, because apparently waking him up involves hurtling the Iron Man armor with Tony Stark inside of it back down to Earth. Well, what happens next is Rhodes, who we all know and love as War Machine, goes out to rescue Tony. And just before Iron Man makes a big splat into the ground, War Machine rescues him. That's 1 point for Rhodey, huh? All right. We see him rescue him, and Tony Stark is woken up. He asks what's going on, and he's sitting around, and he sees that the Controller is making himself known by trying to thrash all the Avengers into the ground, and Tony comes up with an idea. He tells Rhodey to take him off towards the factory because he's suddenly got a few ideas that he had been working on in his dream state. Apparently he had been in a bit of a coma while he was unconscious, but had been over in a sort of stimulated dream state. And he has a weapon that will take out the Controller instantly. Well, the Avengers get help when the champions arrive. And we have a dumbass joke here by Miles Morales, who says, "Why is a guy called the Controller completely out of control?" I don't know. Why don't you state something else that is obvious, like water is liquid, or the air can blow in a wind? Yeah, it wasn't a funny joke. The Wasp, who is now dating Tony, goes off to the factory because she saw him and Rhodey fly off there, and Tony is now working on a new armor. It looks like a variant of the Iron Man 2020 armor, or something like that, with the gears on the shoulders. But apparently Tony says it's a brand new armor. known, if you read the cover of this comic book, you know it's known as the God Killer armor. It still looks like it's ripping off one of Tony's older designs still. And later, and just as she's asking how he's going to beat the controller, Tony Stark says he's got it handled, and that he says something else to them, apparently just out of the blue. He tells them that he's not sure he's Tony Stark anymore, because his mind and memory and body have been, well, brought back to life as almost like a clone or a reboot, or when you're rebooting your computer, or just a clone grown in a lab. So he tells them that while he's getting ready to go out after the controller, because he pretty much wants to make them even more worried than they already are for what's happening. Or maybe he just wants to let them let them in on the fact that he's worried himself about what has happened to him. Now we see the controller getting ready to completely dominate all of the Avengers and the champions at once. And, well, it's kind of underwhelming here. This book ain't so good. But we see something kind of good when we see Iron Man coming at the controller in his God Killer armor. Of course, the controller doesn't know what it's called, and he just sees it as another armor with a gun on it. And Iron Man says, "Congrats, Basil, you made me pull out all the stops." As Iron Man flies down, getting ready to take the controller out. And the artwork here by Valeria Schitti is good. We see Iron Man lift the controller into the air pretty easily. And he says that works out well then, after the controller says to him, no matter what weapon you use, it's not going to beat me because I'm a god. Because next thing that happens is Iron Man tells him what the name of his new armor is as he blasts him. And I gotta tell you, Dan Slott's writing is, well, it's not great or good. It's just telling a battle, so maybe I can't really judge it all that much. And we go to the page where Iron Man gets the coup de grace on the controller by telling him his name. Because this baby's the God Killer. And the controller screams, and a big blue lightning of light lights up the sky, and the controller is beaten. And I have to tell you, the artwork is good here. I'm enjoying it. And we see them, all the Avengers and Champions, marvel at what they're seeing. And Rui Williams says his power readings, they're off the scale. And Miles Morales makes a Dragon Ball joke, saying Iron Man's gone Super Saiyan. And we see Tony's apparent brother, apparently looks like a kid here. He looks like a 12-year-old. And the women who are watching him, they marvel at what Iron Man has just done. Rory asks him, "Did you kill him?" And he says no. And she's worried about his armor. And he says he has no plans to keep it because even he's worried about how powerful it is. And he it gets ready to set it to self-destruct. And I have to say, why? It's so powerful, you have all that power, and you're not going to use it. This comes up a bit more later on, because apparently Tony's brother, who owns this place, or rather the woman owns this place, not only has to deal with the fact that her factory has been blown up, but it was the new God Killer armor that did it. And they're angry that not only did they lose the factory, but also they wanted to get their hands on that armor, seeing how powerful it was. And she says to no one particularly, she says, "You selfless, brilliant bastard." I guess she has a crush on Tony Stark then. And I see no real point to it. Later on, after they're done with what's happened, Tony romances the Wasp, Janet Van Dyne. And she, after they've had their fun, and she reassures her everything is fine, and he has to deal with what the controller has done, with the deaths he's caused. He laments on what has happened to him. He's worried that he's not really himself anymore, and that he's basically no more than a clone, and that he has to deal with the fact that when he was in that virtual world, as I said, when he was in a coma, he basically went back to drinking. Here we can see Tony getting ready to enter a bar when Rhodes once again saves him. He makes sure that Tony Stark doesn't go into that bar and become an alcoholic again. And he says he's there for Tony. And that's how the issue ends. It ends on a wistful, somewhat sad note. And I have to say, this issue was decent. It was good. I hate to praise Dan Slott, but this issue was good. It wasn't a great issue, and it had a bit, kind of few dumb jokes that I really found bad from the champions. And Tony was at times a bit, as usual, a bit pompous because he's Tony Stark. And it really makes no sense that he should suddenly mention that he might not actually be Tony Stark, that he's a clone or at least a backup of his mind in his old body of the original Tony Stark. So I'll tell you this, it was a good issue, not a great issue. So Dan Slott did something right, I suppose. But I've been hearing from other people that Dan Slott's work on Iron Man has been bad. And I only have this issue to go on. Now, if you like this review, subscribe. Make sure you're still subscribed. If you're watching my videos but you're not subscribed, please subscribe to me. I want you to hit that bell and get all the updates on my own future videos. And I want you to hit that like button and leave some comments down below. Now, the reason why I want you to keep coming back for my future videos is because I want you to be here when I announce my own release of my own independent comic book, Scumdogs. And I'll tell you this much else. It'll be a good comic book. I'll try to make it better than what Dan Slott is doing, even though I thought Dan Slott was doing a good job in this issue. But apparently he's doing bad. I'll try to be better than Dan Slott. I'm Chris Williams. I'll be back again tomorrow with another review. I'll see you all again soon, fans.